Betsy, you had mentioned the economy being a great game changer in many ways. And I always think about growing up with parents who had a depression mentality, which was a generational change. What is your opinion about the current economic situation? Do you think it's generational, or do you think it's just a blip that will correct?
We do a study. We've done about 8 waves so far that we call the Consumer Attitude Tracking Study. And it was certainly born out of at the end of 2008, when nobody knew how long it was going to last, but it was certainly having an impact on so many things in the country, in terms of how people saw themselves, how optimistic they were, how they saw the presidency, the election which had just taken place, the whole notion of optimism and pessimism, which have so much to do with how people are consuming. And at the time, and we talked to a lot of people, we talked to consumers certainly, but we also talked to a lot of research companies. At the time, the feeling was this was going to be a short-term blip. This was going to affect purchasing, affect optimism, affect certainly what people could afford to do in their lives, affect advertising, until it didn't. And then I remember someone saying to me, you know what, human beings are basically aspirational. Nobody adapts frugality as a strategy. It's a tactic. It's a tactic for coping. As soon as this is over, famous last words of assuming this is over, things will go back, maybe not necessarily to, the high living 90s, but things will go back to something more approaching normalcy. Not happening. What seems to have happened instead is, first of all, there's no general agreement that the economic downturn is actually over. We just did one of our waves of the study, and we're finding very little change in how people view their prospects and their opportunities, and in fact their optimism. But what to me is so interesting is that people adopted certain habits and certain coping mechanisms during the worst of the downturn, that now even people who don't have to do those things anymore are. And it's become a badge, it's become a source of pride, that I don't have to spend the way I used to. I don't have to buy as many magazines as I used to. I don't have to shop for brand names, expensive brand names, the way I used to. Maybe some things I still want the brand, but certainly not everything. So I think the way consumers are coming out of the recession, which certainly is slower than a lot had anticipated a year ago, suggests that that the way we've lived, the way we've consumed, will probably never be the same. And that has a lot of implications certainly for consumers, but for advertisers, for the way we produce content, for the kind of content we produce, and the way we market our products to consumers.
So Betsy, can you give me 3 predictions for the next 5 years?
I remember when I was at Dancer, I think, there was someone who said about predictions, because we used to do a lot of the global and U.S. Advertising spending predictions, and his guiding principle was give them a number or give them a date, but never give them both at the same time. So I'm not going to tell you when these things are going to happen, but I think there will be more of an understanding that consumers are situational media users, and will not think in terms of loyalty there'll be much less loyalty, if there's any loyalty left to an individual media platform, but consumers will gravitate to what is relevant to them in terms of the situation that they're in. So I think this whole idea, which is frustrating because people still want to think about what this will kill, that will kind of come to the surface. That there will be no way of getting around the fact that that each new medium doesn't kill the one that comes before. I think in terms of metrics, every medium out there will have new metrics of audience, of engagement, of actions taken, that this will take us all to a new level in understanding how the media work together, because this is probably still part of my second prediction. There will be a metric that will look at how media work together. We talk about it a lot now. There's not a lot of actions about getting there, but I think it will be audience based, it will be engagement based, and it will suggest how advertisers need to use more media to accomplish their objectives. Number 3. Help me out. What have other people said? What have other people said? How about this? Advertising will be back. That advertisers will understand that their ability to influence consumers is not driven solely by specific websites, is not driven solely by social media, but really depends on consumer engagement and consumer access to media that are able to communicate certain messages. That if you want to get on a consumer's shopping list, you need to advertise. And I think a lot of this has been challenged, certainly by the recession, but by new media that come along. I think there will be an acknowledgement that in order to sell product, in order to sell services, you need a much more holistic approach, and advertising is part of that approach.